webinar. We would not be able to provide these educational programs without the support of our generous partners. Our second session will discuss EEG-based brain-computer interface technologies, and I am pleased to welcome our next presenter, Dr. Jose del R. Millan. Dr. Millan is a professor and holds the Carol Cockrell Curran Chair in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. He's also a professor in the Department of Neurology at Dell Medical School and faculty of the Mulva Clinic for the Neurosciences. He's a co-director of the UT CARE initiative. Dr. Millan received a PhD in computer science from the Technical University of Catalonia, Barcelona. Prior to joining UT Austin, he was a research scientist at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission in Ispra, Italy, and a senior researcher at the IDIAP Research Institute in Martigny, Switzerland. And I apologize for probably mispronouncing that. He's also been a visiting scholar at the universities of Berkeley and Stanford, as well as at the International Computer Science Institute in Berkeley. Most recently, he was the DFITEC Foundation Chair in Brain-Machine Interface at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne in Switzerland, where he helped establish the Center for Neural Prosthetics. Dr. Millan has made several seminal contributions to the field of brain-machine interfaces, especially based on electroencephalogram signals. Most of his achievements revolve around the design of brain-controlled robots. He has received several recognitions for these seminal and pioneering achievements, notably the IEEE SMC Norbert Wiener Award in 2011, elevation to IEEE Fellow in 2017, and elected Fellow of the International Academy of Medical and Biological Engineering in 2020. In addition to his work in the fundamentals of brain-machine interface and design of neural prosthetics, Dr. Millan is prioritizing the translation of brain-machine interface to people who live with motor and cognitive disabilities. In parallel, he's designing brain-machine interface technology to offer new interaction modalities for able-bodied people that augment their abilities. So Dr. Millan, thank you for being with us here today. I will now turn the time over to you.
So thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be here with you today and to share the work that we have been doing over, I was thinking today, more than 20 years now. Let me start sharing my presentation. If I manage to find where is the okay. I cannot see it still. No, let me do something else. Why I cannot see the here, yes. Okay, share. Okay, can you see my screen?
We can. You might just switch it to presenter mode, but we can see it. Looks great.
Okay. Is it okay now?
Yeah, looks great.
Very good. So following up the presentation by Dr. Rubins on the invasive modalities of brain-computer interfaces, now I will be focusing on the non-invasive side that generally is based on the recording of electroencephalographic signals. So to do so, essentially you see these pictures over here where the subjects are wearing these caps and you see the electrodes integrated into those caps, and we are recording directly the brain electrical activity generated always by individual neurons inside the brain that once we have a large population of them working in synchrony, their combined electrical field is sufficiently large in order for us to measure that activity from outside the head. You know already the architecture of a brain-machine interface. I will not go through that again, simply to emphasize that we can now replace the implanted electrodes by a simple cap, and now we can, as before, start acquiring, analyzing, decoding brain electrical activity in order to convey commands to external devices. And most of the devices that I have been working on over the years are robots, sophisticated robots, so that this illustrates that even if the non-invasive EEG signals don't have the same spatial resolution because we cannot see with high precision what it is going on inside the brain. Why this has to stop? I don't understand. Let me go back. Oh, here it is. Still, we can decode broad commands like initiate a step, left step, right step, move the wheelchair to the left, to the right, forward. The same for teleoperation robots, the same for hand exoskeletons, closing, opening the hand, holding objects, releasing objects, etc. Now, we have been working over the years with, let me, I don't have a, I don't know what is going on with the network, but I don't have a precise control. Over the years, we have been working with a substantial amount of people who have been testing our BCIs. In total, we have more than 1,300 users. I want to emphasize that more than 200 of them are people with severe disabilities. And now I would like to share with you a video that is featuring one of these users, one of these subjects who suffer, and I say it in past tense because this person has already passed away, muscular dystrophy. So let me present you. Can you hear?
No, I think you might have to stop sharing and then reshare with the sound. There's a little
Oh,
box that you click.
okay, let me do that. I missed that.
No problem. I meant to remind you.
Where is the button that I need to press?
If you go back to share content, when you open that up, there's a little box at the
Oh,
top that
share
says,
computer audio. Yep.
yep.
Oh, well, um, okay, it is. Well, you don't need to, it is in Italian, actually, but you will see the transcript of what Francesco is saying.
Mi chiamo Francesco, ho 19 anni, abito in Italia, in di Bologna, ho appena finito di e adesso mi preparo per andare in città di Bologna e farò una dimostrazione del. Quindi adesso ho il risultato stata apposta per me. esperienza queste cose sono cose salve. Testing one particular BCI prototype, that's a brain-computer interface. We're collecting Francesco's brain signals, and we want to use these signals to directly control this little robot so he can navigate around the area with the robot. È assolutamente centrato sul centro di vita, i nostri utenti fanno anche dei nostri team di ricerca. Il lavoro di Francesco è fondamentale per sviluppare queste tecnologie prima ancora che di. The great thing about Toby is that we've worked with more than 100 users, testing many of our different prototypes.
Francesco è utile in questo caso, è utile ad aiutare qualcun altro. Dice che dovrebbero andare avanti e continuare questo progetto, ma se vogliono io vado da con loro, sono a loro disposizione, per lui è entusiasta.
Di oggi ne provo, anche se questi sono passati 6 mesi e oggi rispetto a sono andato anche un po' di meglio. It's focused on communication, entertainment, motor rehabilitation, motor substitution. In the future, you could imagine that you could look for a robot that's located in a museum or in a public garden, drive this around visit these places without having to leave his own. Oggetti come Toby rivelano la faccia, scienza scientifica e ne traggono grande beneficio.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a hint of the kind of devices that these people with disabilities, in this case Francesco and others like him who suffer from muscular dystrophy, have been controlling during our research. Let me give you a couple of details about this telepresent robot that Francesco was controlling. So initially, he was participating in a experimental setup with a few other people across Europe, where they were connected to our lab. At that time, it was in Switzerland, and they had to control this telepresent robot that was always starting at this position R that you see over here. And then randomly they had to generate either the blue, the red, or the green trajectory, each trajectory having 2 sub-goals. So they need to go, for example, in the case of the blue trajectory, to position 1, then position 2, and finally return back to the initial position. All of them were controlling the robot correctly, in the sense that they managed to generate the trajectories in the correct order. But then we started to ask how efficient is brain control in the operation of this telepresence robot. And what we did was to compare the time it required them to generate the trajectory using their brain commands to the time for generating a similar trajectory, but in this case, delivering, let me call it like that, manual commands between quotes, because manual command for a person with a severe disability will depend on the residual function that they have at that time. So, for example, Francesco, rather than using the arms that he had some problems to use, he was using movements of the head in order to deliver the left and right command. Now, what you have here in red is the population of 9 subjects with disabilities, and we were comparing the time it took for them to generate the trajectory delivering brain commands over the time that it took for them to generate this trajectory, actually a bunch of trajectories delivering manual commands. If this bar is above 100%, this means that it took longer with the brain, whereas if it is lower, it means that with the brain they were faster. Now, what you can see is that if you compare this red population to a control population of young people without any kind of physical disabilities, you see that there was no difference between them. They were performing equally well. And even more, there was no difference between the time it took them to generate the trajectory delivering brain commands or manual commands. Let me return for a moment to this architecture of a brain-machine interface or brain-computer interface in order to highlight that whenever the subject is receiving the feedback, for example, this telepresence robot turning and moving along the path that I want them to move so that they are executing correctly my mental commands. So this feedback will be reinforcing the neural processes that the person is engaging in order to deliver that particular command better and better over time. On the contrary, if the feedback is indicating that the brain-computer interface is making the robot move in a different direction than the desired one, meaning that the brain-computer interface was not decoding correctly the intent of the subject, well, this will be a kind of negative reinforcement to change the way I am modulating my brain signals in order to do it better in the future. This means that actually this feedback is not only enabling the subject to learn voluntarily to control the brain signals so as to modify them and deliver better and better commands, but because of this learning process on the subject side, this is also requesting modifications at the level of the machine learning algorithms that we are using, because now the models that we had at the very beginning are not valid any longer because the brain signals are different than those with which the subject started to use the brain-computer interface. And this is something that we need to take into account. Let me, before going to this particular topic of these trade-off between how much we need to teach people to volitionally change their brain signal as opposed or as complementary to the machine learning algorithms that we can develop that will take automatically care of this variation in our brain signals. Let me introduce you the first subject with disabilities with whom we were working this was in London in December 2000. So this subject at that time was operating our first prototype for typing. So that you can see over here that the subject had control over 3 different mental commands, and each command was associated to one block of the keyboard. And this is a normal keyboard in our computer. So that if the subject delivered the blue command, it was this blue side that was selected, and so on and so forth. So that if it is the blue, this will be split again in 3 until there is only in 3 steps one letter that remains, and the subject can select that letter. So this gentleman over here, also a muscular dystrophy person, could spell sentences at the rate of 20 seconds per letter. Definitely way slower than with invasive approaches, those that you have just witnessed before, but still quite encouraging. So now let me move on to the more recent text entry system that we have developed, and where we were explicitly asking, can we develop advanced machine learning algorithms to facilitate this user learning process. So what you see over here is a simple linear visual organization of the letters and symbols that people may want to select. At any given time, this orange bubble is the operational area of the brain-computer interface. And you see this vertical red bar that is separating this operational range in two parts, the left and the right, so that if the subject delivers a right command, since there is only one letter, then automatically that letter will be selected. And if the subject delivers a left command, then this vertical line will move in order to separate the three remaining letters in two parts until again the subject reaches only one. Now, how this process of the operational range, the movement of the vertical bar is controlled is because behind we have a language model that is a kind of tree that is telling us which are the probabilities that given a certain number of characters that have been already selected, for example C and A, which is the split of these four letters that remain in the operational range, so that we have the same probability to select right than to select left. And now it is, you can imagine that the first word that comes to your head as a combination of those four is the word car. This is why R is on the right side. Very good. So on top of this simple, between quotes, brain-computer interface, we added an algorithm that without any training by the subject was inferring, which is the character that they want to select, and was automatically adapting the brain-computer interface so as to allow people to write words without any previous training. They came for the first time to the lab, they started to write words immediately. So we were testing that with 10 people, 6 of them were experts, 4 of them were naive. Previously, we had demonstrated that also people with severe disabilities could operate this keyboard, but for this experiment, we were only using people without any kind of disability. And you can see now that if DCA stands for context awareness, the new algorithm that that operates in a transparent manner, this is as efficient as an algorithm that requires previous training for each of the subjects. So we were very happy because it seems that machine learning avoids lengthy user training because people can start operating their BCI in order to write whatever they want to write since the very beginning. But the question then is, well, if machine learning is helping people, is supporting the learning process of people, what we expect to see is that also the brain signals are changing over time, because this is the landmark of learning a new skill, that we are capable to encode that skill in the patterns of activity of our brain, so that with time we will have better and better patterns. In this particular case of a brain-computer interface, patterns that will allow us to separate better and better the EEG signals associated to command A from the EEG signals associated to command B. This means that if there is a true learning process that is supported by these changes in the EEG, as people are writing, we should see these distances between the samples associated to command B and command A growing apart. But when we analyze these dynamics of distances between the samples associated to the two classes, surprisingly, rather than increasing so that they are more separable, they are decreasing. So it seems that the machine learning is preventing people to learn because they are degrading the quality of their brain signals. And when we were interviewing the subjects in order to try to understand why it was so, we discovered that they exhibited a very, I would say, normal behavior. If the machine is doing everything for me, I don't need to pay any attention. I don't need to make any effort because it is working. So it seems that when you put too much machine learning, this is preventing people to learn, to modulate the brain signals in order to acquire this BCI skill. That is what we want to have at the end of the day. So we change the procedure when we observe those results, and we decided to give more weight to the formal process of subject training. And in order to test this new modality of mutual learning, because we won't remember that the subject learns, but also that the machine learns, because in order to track the evolution of the brain signals of the subject, we recruited and participated two subjects with a high level spinal cord injury that led to complete tetraplegia for the two of them. They were participating in a very special competition, international competition, that was intended to promote the use of bionic assistive technologies, because if you think about the Paralympics, what you have people with disabilities competing in races, but they can't use any technology aid. In this case, the nature of the competition is such that they can't finish the race without the assistive technology. So in the case of the brain race, these athletes had to control an avatar that you see here in this picture. This avatar has to run from the beginning to the end of the parkour, and as they move along the race, they will be passing through different color paths. There are 4 different color paths in this competition, and now the subject, the human, has to deliver a correct brain command associated to the color of that path for their avatar to speed up. If they don't manage to deliver any command, any brain command, the avatar will keep moving at the normal speed. Whereas if they deliver a wrong command, the avatar will slow down. So now it is easy to understand that the better the BCI performance is, not only in terms of accuracy, that you deliver always the correct command for the correct color path, but also the time it takes for you to deliver that command, because if you deliver it at the very beginning of the avatar entering the path, then they will be running faster. So we were training these two subjects as for any athlete over a number of months, 7 and 3 months of training, intense training. And what I am showing you over here is the evolution of the BCI performance over time for each of them. So you see that they were improving over time. For example, in the case of the subject 1, he had a slow start because at the very beginning, for several weeks, he could not perform very well, but all of a sudden, because of this mutual learning, where we were forcing the subject to adapt the brain signals to a decoder, to a BCI that was not changing too fast, so that they had the time to learn, which is the modulations that they need to learn to generate or to induce in their brain signals in order to deliver the correct commands. You could see now at this point that these subjects started to perform very, very, very well. So this is a race. We don't only want to deliver commands with high accuracy, but also to deliver fast, because this is what will have both elements, latency in delivering the correct commands and the accuracy in delivering the command will have the impact in the race time. And now you can see that if we compare the time it took for them to finish these races at the very beginning of their training in red as compared to the last part of their training, including the day of the competition, there was a statistically significant improvement in race time. But most importantly, what we observe is that as they train, indeed, their brain patterns change. So what I am showing you in this plot over here is not the actual brain activity that they were generating. What I am showing you is for every position corresponding to the electrodes that we are using over on the head of the subject, subject 1, subject 2, we are indicating how much was that single electrode capable to differentiate the different commands that they had to deliver. Now, the yellowish it is, so in the scale, blue meaning low discriminancy, meaning that position was not relevant in order to distinguish the different commands that they want to deliver, whereas the red part should be the relevant. You can see that slowly this becomes stronger and very stable over time. Of course, we need to start with something that is slightly better than random, so that now this feedback that they were receiving makes sense. It is congruent for them in the majority of the occasions, so that they can refine it to increase this discriminability. And if the feedback is not correct, to slightly change it to find a different brain pattern that will facilitate the control of their avatar. So now we can observe that indeed learning how to operate a brain-computer interface, actually a brain control device, is associated with changes in the brain signals, changes in the way our brain is generating different patterns of brain electrical activity, each pattern associated to a different command. This we have been repetitively observing. Let me show you one of the latest examples. This is also with highly spinal cord injury patients, again tetraplegic, in some cases very severe. In the case of this gentleman over here, he had to rely on assisted ventilation. This was an experiment conducted in a clinic in Bochum, Germany. Now, well, this is a little video of the training process for this subject, where the subject is delivering commands to the wheelchair in order to navigate safely in this hospital environment. This guy, who was the operator in charge of this emergency button in the case something goes wrong, was so excited that he couldn't stop talking to the subject, even if we were telling him, hey, this is an experiment, please don't disturb the patient. He was too excited to see how the subject was capable to control the device. And in a nutshell, we were working with 3 of these subjects, also over several months, in order to train them how to acquire the brain, the BCI skills to control their wheelchair. And what you see over here is a replication, is a drawing of the rehabilitation ward that they go regularly to do their therapy, where you can see the wheelchair in the bottom right part of this word. This was the starting position for the wheelchair, and now the wheelchair has to go through the center of the word, so that we were defining over here a waypoint. So it was mandatory for them to go through this part, then going to the right in order to rotate, second waypoint, coming back, third waypoint, and finally turning to the right at the opposite side of the rehabilitation ward. In black, what you can see is the ideal trajectory that the wheelchair should have taken, that takes into account distance with respect to objects, distance with respect to the waypoints, and smoothness of the trajectory, because you don't want to have a trajectory that is shaky. And now the color that you see over here represents the frequency that the wheelchair pass over every cell in this environment, so that in blue are cells that the wheelchair never passed by, and in yellow you have the cells that the wheelchair were going through regularly. And you can see now that this yellow path that is emerging from this color map is really very close to the ideal trajectory, so that yes, the subjects with training were capable to control a sophisticated device as a wheelchair moving in a natural environment. A natural environment for them is this rehabilitation ward that they have to come regularly. And again, this story repeats. As they are acquiring this BCI control, these patterns of activity that discriminate between the different commands that they are delivering to the wheelchair emerges over time. And they are at the very end very stable. And this is what explains that they have good BCI control. Well, if this is true, then this means that BCI control is about learning how to modulate their brain signals. If we are learning, we are changing the way we are volitionally generating signals, rhythmic signals in our brain. This means that it has to be some kind of plasticity going on in our brain. And if this is so, then we can not only develop assisted devices like the wheelchair or the text entry system or the telepresence robot that you have seen before. We can also start developing rehabilitation interventions driven by our BCIs, so that we will be exploiting this induced plasticity through the use of the BCI to recover function. So to test this hypothesis, we are running several clinical trials. In the first of them, where we were recruiting chronic stroke patients, we had the hypothesis that if we close the loop between decoding the intention for one of these stroke patients to make a movement of the hand that they can't control because this hand, due to the stroke damage, is paralyzed, then we can deliver functional electrical stimulation, so small currents over the peripheral nerves that are controlling the muscles that operate the hand, so that we are turning this intention to make a movement of the hand into the actual movement of the hand, and more importantly, we are delivering natural proprioceptive feedback back to the brain, because this electrical stimulation over the peripheral nerves is similar to whenever we make a movement of our hand and we feel that movement. We know where our hands and the rest of our body, by the way, is in space, because this constant interplay between our brain sending down motor commands in order to execute some movements or to keep the position of some part of our body, and proprioceptive feedback telling our brain, yes, you did it, or no, you didn't, you need to make a correction. So we recruited 27 of these chronic stroke patients, all of them with a severe paralysis of one of their hands. We split these 27 patients in two groups. One, the real experimental BCI group, where upon the detection from the perilesional area around the stroke that they were attempting to do a movement of their paralyzed hand, this triggered the functional electrical stimulation or neuromuscular electrical stimulation. This is the experimental group. And then 13 others were in the sham group. Sham in this case means that they were also receiving this functional electrical stimulation. Their hand was moved in the same way as for the experimental group. The difference was that the stimulation that the sham group was receiving was not contingent, was not associated to the decoding of their intention to make a movement. It was completely random. So the intervention lasted 5 weeks, 2 weeks per session, and this is the primary clinical outcome. You see over here that at the very beginning, the two groups had a similar level of functional disability. This is Fugel-Meyer score, that it is an index of functional disability. The lower it is, the more severe is this deficit. And only at the end of these 5 weeks intervention, we can observe that only the BCI group had a significant improvement. And this improvement was more than 5 points. It was 6 something in this Fugel-Meyer scale. And this means that this increase in functional recovery was such that it was clinically significant. This means that they could do things that they couldn't do before with their hand. Moreover, we sent people home after these 5 weeks intervention, and they returned 9 months later, and we evaluated again their functional scores, and we can see that whatever they recover after 5 weeks remain 9 months later. And this was not, I mean, for the sham group, it was also the case. There was no improvement, no decrease, but this difference remained for the BCI and the sham group. And again, what is explaining this functional recovery? Well, here we don't have yet a causal relationship between changes in brain activity and that explains why they recover, but what we found is a strong correlation between a particular change in their damaged sensory motor cortex and the recovery. And what was this change in activity? This is the connectivity. Connectivity measure indicates how much information is flowing from point 1 to point 2. But we can also compute this connectivity inside the same region. And actually, when we compute the connectivity index inside the damaged motor cortex. For some it was the left, for some it was the right side, because the paralysis could be in any side. We observed that at the very beginning there was almost no activity index in the damaged cortex, because it is damaged, and the BCI group at the end had a substantial increase. This negative value for the sham group doesn't mean that they were in a worse condition. This is simply it was no change at a significant statistically change. It was around random values. And so it seems that the BCI intervention has reactivated this damaged cortex. To conclude, I would like to change a little bit gears, because all what I have been presenting to you up to now is based on the modulation of sensory motor rhythms, the intention to move different parts of our body that for one reason or another we have lost control upon. But actually, in any interaction like the one that happens whenever you want to control this hand exoskeleton with a brain-machine interface in order to close the hand around an object, grab it, release it, etc., whenever we are using this brain-computer interface in order to execute those movements, actually, we are also engaged in some perceptual and cognitive processes, because whenever we are observing whether or not our mental intents are correctly transformed into the desired actions, we need to make judgments. Are things going well? Are things going too fast, too slow? How is the dynamic of the interaction? And in particular, we are interested on a brain potential that we can record from the EEG that we call the error-related potential. What is that? Imagine that you are interacting with the wheelchair. You want to deliver command A, and sooner or later there is no BCI invasive or non-invasive that is correct all the time. Sooner or later there will be errors. At this particular time, the brain-computer interface makes a wrong decoding of your intention to execute command A, and the wheelchair starts executing command B. And as soon as you feel that the wheelchair is moving in the wrong direction with respect to the one that you wanted the wheelchair to move along, you realize that this is a mistake. And faster than you can say mistake or error or no or whatever expression, there is this potential in your brain that generates, that is elicited, indicating that you are aware that this was a wrong decision. Now, we can use this potential as a direct way of interaction. For example, imagine now that you have this text entry system where you have letters in the screen, symbols again, as before. But now, rather than you being in direct control of this cursor that will be moving towards the desired letter, this cursor is moving autonomously, so that this will simplify your task. Because all what you need to do now is to monitor whether the movement of the green circle, the cursor, is going to the correct direction, towards the location where it is the letter that you want to select. If this is the case, nothing will happen in your brain. But if this movement is in the wrong direction, then these error-related potentials will appear in your brain. Our BCI can decode it, and we can inform this speller that no, this was a wrong movement. And what is behind is again a language model that is simply trying to infer which is the most probable letter that the subject wants to select at any given time. So initially we will have a random probability because there is no reason why we may prefer one letter upon any other. But as soon as there are a couple of letters or more, then the distribution of which is the most probable letter that follows those that have been already selected changes, and you may infer which is the next letter quite easily, so that now the cursor can start moving directly over there. Still, there are probabilities that this is not actually the correct letter, and the modulation of this and the coding of this error-related potential can drive the cursor directly towards the letter. Actually, this is one of the experiments where we were working with 7 subjects. One of them was a person who suffered from an advanced ALS, and you can see that indeed the speed at which they were selecting each letter in order to write the word brain was faster and faster and faster. And this ALS person was performing as well as any of the healthy individuals in the cohort. Finally, what I want to say and to share with you is that the same approach, decoding the presence of error-related potentials while the subject is simply monitoring how a task is being performed, can be developed in order to teach a personalized robotic assistance, in this case a robot arm, how to move in a table, picking objects, moving those objects to other parts of the table while avoiding other objects that may be already on the table, so as to personalize the kind of trajectories that the robot will be moving along in order to have your preferred execution of those movements, because it so happened, and it was shown in the experiments, that there are not 2 people who have the same preferred kind of trajectory. So now all what will happen is that the person, even if suffering from a severe disability, can always initiate by delivering some residual command the initiation of a movement, and the robot will take over because the robot is autonomous, and the subject will be monitoring and correcting and teaching this personalization of how to interact with the rest of the table. I stop over here. I thank you for your attention, and I will be pleased to take any question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Millan. This is just incredible technology, incredible research, and very exciting to see what's coming down the pipeline. Let me see here if we have any questions. It doesn't look like anything's coming in just yet. In terms of, I mean, I have a question for you.
Yep,
in
sure.
terms of the applicability of this for the neuromuscular disease community, how would they access technology like this? You know, you've mentioned some clinical trials, but if they were interested in getting involved, what would they do?
Well, at this moment, I don't have any active clinical trial going on, but this will be active anytime soon in order to test our devices. EEG has one inconvenience, and it is the fact that every day you need to set it up, remove it. So this is a different research line. How can we develop more permanent technology so that it is not necessary to set up and remove every day the EEG? Yeah, but this will take still some time. For now, what the trials that we do, we, depending on the functional situation of the person, they come to our lab, they come to the hospital, or we go to their home or physical home, or any rehabilitation home or home where they are.
Okay. It looks like somebody mentioned that this is absolutely amazing work. She has been taking some notes as she considers future alternatives for her son who lives with Becker and possible dysphagia issues. Another comment here, just thanking you for the information. Give it another second here to see if any other questions come in.
So I see that there is a question asking for children. We have been working with children. They are challenging. They are challenging for a couple of reasons. So I have never worked with children with muscular dystrophy. But still, one situation that we have been facing with them is that in order for you to operate this brain-machine interface, brain-computer interface, especially during the initial phase of training, it requires a sustained attention. You need to be very focused on the mental processes that you are engaged onto in order to deliver the different commands. And children tend not to have a persistent attentional span. Their span is very short. This is a problem. We have been working also with cerebral palsy, and there the problems are in addition of another nature that I don't believe it is the case for muscular dystrophy, so I will not comment on that. The other situation that happens with children, for example, with this error-related potential, is that their brain is not yet mature, especially the frontal part of our brain. It matures when we are in our late adolescence. So this means that those signals are harder to detect because they are not yet, focal. They are a little bit spread in our brain. So these are challenges. These are not unsurmountable challenges, but definitely it is more challenging than working with adolescents and adults.
Now, that definitely makes sense. I hadn't thought about the fact that the brain hasn't fully developed yet and how that might play into it. So definitely makes sense. Dr. Millan, looking ahead, say 5-10 years from now, where do you see this technology going, and will it be more accessible, do you think?
I hope so. I hope so. I hope that we will be able also to have a variety of devices, some invasive, some non-invasive. I hope that we will break a fundamental barrier that is the complexity of the deployment, in the deployment of the PCI technology, because you need to have experts around to set up the system, to calibrate the parameters. So this is an active research area that I am committed to push forward to reduce these barriers so that eventually people can have their brain-computer interface 24 hours a day available at home with minimal support. Nevertheless, we will need to as anything, we will need to provide assistance and maintenance. This we will need to have, but minimal.
Sure. Well, that is very exciting. Is there anything that our community, that patients, individuals living with neuromuscular disease can do to help support the technology moving forward?
Yes, whenever we have any clinical trial available, I would love to have people in your community participating in order to help us explore what it is feasible, which are the limits of this technology.
Well, great. Well, Dr. Millan, thank you so much. Let me check our chat one more time. I think we have gotten to all the questions. So this has been so informative and just very fascinating technology. Thank you for sharing your time, your expertise with us, and your dedication to this community. and helping to overcome these barriers so that people can live more independently. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for the invitation. If you have any question, follow up, please feel free to reach out to me through Marisa. I didn't put my email in the slides, sorry for that, but I am open to follow up any question that you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Millan. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Muchas gracias a los que escriben en español.
Wonderful.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.